Episode 33 starts now, but first let's give you a brief recap. You recall that Marie is still up in the ceiling. She's clinging to the wall with her gecko feet, and her visibility is not powered up yet, so she's hiding in the shadows. But now the tormenting of Judge continues, and there's a real danger that Judge will die. And so she realized that she has to do something. What is she going to do? And that's where it continues. So stay tuned. And now, 33. Let's stay tuned. Marie realized that she again unwittingly loosened some of the rock dust as she readjusts her feet. She's almost afraid to move again and hopes that she is deep enough in the dark shadows to remain cloaked. She knows her invisible power is still charging and needs to stay very quiet and secluded in the darkness for just a little while longer. Douglas stands up to investigate as well, while Marie remains quiet and not breathing at all. She knows she is she's just minutes away from becoming fully charged. Douglas turns on his night scope and using it as a periscope scans the area for a potential target. Marie finds herself precariously stuck to the ceiling as the darkness seems to evaporate all around her with that beaming torch. She still has her third power of causing darkness available to her and begins to contemplate using it. Cody continues his efforts for discovery with his own light beam. Doug's interest has waned and he returns to his efforts to torment Judge. The light is moving closer to her and she realizes she's going to have to take a chance with her third power, the power of darkness. She causes a cloud of dense darkness to surround her as she moves blindly inside her own dark cloud to another secluded spot of the wall and ceiling on the rock mass. She knows the darkness will not last indefinitely either, or in hopes that her invisible power will return fully charged. The downside of using her power of darkness on herself makes her blind as a bat. Her normal powers of seeing in the dark work well under most conditions, but not from this self-imposed darkness. Her heart begins to race and her hands start to sweat more profusely than it ever had before. The total darkness brings back old fears and anxieties about being afraid of the dark. Her growing anxiety and the fear of the darkness makes her fear losing her gecko grip from the ceiling and falling was becoming a real possibility. Her anxiety begins to spike as her breath shortens, as she is starting to become claustrophobic. She feels trapped and again lost like a little girl growing up and held hostage by those private childlike fears. After a long few seconds has passed, Marie releases herself from the dark cloud and is relieved to see that Cody has given up on his ceiling search and is returning his attention back to Judge and Doug. Marie looks in a different position on the ceiling and carefully to another dark spot. When she arrives, she almost yells out as a small animal moves past her with another momentarily tangled up in her hair. It must be the bumblebee bat, she guesses. She remains mute and does not move as a swarm of little guys begin to leave her and fly right over Doug and Cody's head. Douglas drops his weapon to his side and holsters it and says to Cody, "See? I told you, bats." Marie's heart and pulse slows with relief. She is surprised that they would be here so deep in the cave, these bats, and reasons that there must be another exit from somewhere. This could be helpful later on. Douglas moves over to another rock and pulls out his pistol again and teasingly points it back at Judge. He again starts to snicker and with amusement once again as Cody walks over to Doug and says, "Put it away, Doug." Doug tilts his head back to Judge, smiles wickedly, and resumes his efforts to goad Judge again to try to make a move for the gun. Judge looks away and continues to bury his chin deep in his own chest, while waiting for Doug to grow tired of this little game. Doug has not grown tired of this at all. Instead, he waits with a smug grin. After a few more moments, Doug finally does grow tired of this and moves slowly to Judge and places a gun on the rock in front of him and pretends to look away. Judge shifts his position, and Doug quickly grabs his weapon. Judge says nothing as Doug realizes that he may have not even known it was there. He moves even closer to Judge and says, "Now I'm going to rest my hand a bit and put my piece right here. Just don't touch it, Judge," he says direly. Marie begins to fear for the worst. She realizes she needs to do something to rescue her father, but is uncertain how to do it by herself. A diversion would be nice, but she feels that could backfire. After all, these two men are very unstable, unpredictable, and clearly very dangerous. Perhaps she should get help from the others, but again, she's uncertain if they would be here and when they return with the others. Marie knew that her father, when he was in the police force, how important the element of surprise was. Perhaps that would be good for her too. The longer she thought about it, the more she thought it was in her best and only real option. If only she could be as quick as Time Out with her running speed and could freeze time, that would be much easier. Or if she had the agility and fighting skill of Sizzlecat, and of course, her ability to use her fire. She didn't have any of that. Her powers were centered around defensive more than offensive things. Who was she kidding? What could she do? Besides, she always detested violence and turned down repeated efforts from her Aunt Boxy to learn the martial arts when they were all together back on Earth. What was she going to do? Doug and Cody both continued to be very edgy with the situation and started engaging in minor bickering with each other. She wonders if this is something that just might work out for her benefit in rescuing her father. She begins to formulate a plan. Her strongest assets, abilities, along with the element of surprise, just might help her pull this off. She is now fully charged and turns completely invisible and crawls along the ceiling where her father is sitting just below her. She gets ready to make a move when suddenly Cody stands up and moves to the other side of the room. Marie fears something might have just gone wrong. Maybe he heard or detected her somehow. She remains motionless and looks over to Doug, who continues to polish his gun unconcerned. Cody turns around and walks over to Doug and asks him to come over to the other side of the room to help him move some wooden freight for him to sit on. The Judge continues motionless with his head still buried between his legs, refusing even to look at him and show any interest in what they were doing. Doug half-heartedly stands up and slowly moves over to Judge and nudges his foot with his. Judge looks up slowly as Doug bends over and picks up his grin and says, "Too bad, Hotshot. You missed your opportunity to even the score." Marie needs to let her father know that she's there and will no doubt need his help with these two guys. As she hangs over the ceiling directly over Judge, she carefully drops invisibly to the ground, landing directly on the sandy portion of the floors just behind him. She gently rubs his fingernails with her fingers, as she always had done when she was little, to get his attention, and whispers, "Daddy, it's me. Don't open your eyes. Listen. Be ready to move." She looks at him for a second and wonders if he heard her. Maybe he's sleeping or passed out from all the trauma. Maybe he may have thought it was all just a dream. She wasn't sure. She whispers again, "Did you hear me?" Judge lifts his head slowly from his chest, opens his eyes slowly as if dreaming a past warm memory. She continues to gently rub the top of his fingernails. "Daddy, please, I'm here invisibly. I need to know you know that," she whispers with more force. He slowly touches the unseen appendages of Marie's hand to verify the reality, as a small grin appears on his face and disappears quickly after the wink of his left eye to let her know he knows. Marie exhales with relief as she moves slowly over to where the two men are struggling to position the large wooden supply crate. Marie sees his large gun crested safely inside the holster, dropped over a large rope. He must have removed it so it would not get damaged when they lifted and stacked the boxes. Marie sees the gun and plans on lifting it and pointing it at them to get them to surrender. But she wonders if that was going to be a good idea. She was not sure if she could shoot another human being if she had to. She considers another course of action. She slowly reaches out and moves Doug's gun out of the holster side, sitting on the former rock, and places the weapon inside a nearby bag close to Cody. They finished stacking and began to choose another spot to sit. Cody walks over to his bag and pulls out a book to read and never sees the gun where Marie had placed Doug's gun. Doug finishes making the last adjustment to the alignment of the boxes and walks over to put his gun holster back on his belt and notices his gun is missing. He looks over to Judge, who continues slumped over with his head held down between his knees. He scratches his head, wondering where he might have put his gun. He could have sworn that it was in the holster when he removed his belt. He begins to slowly walk around the area looking for the gun. After not finding it right away, the seconds tick by and his personal dread continues to mount. Finally, he can't stand it any longer. "Hey, where's my piece? I can't find it," replies the jumpy Doug. While visibly annoyed at first, Cody barely acknowledges him as he continues to read his book. Doug is becoming more annoyed as his unresponsiveness and kicks his foot off the large stove that he was using as a footrest. "I said, where's my piece?" demands Doug belligerently. Cody stands up angrily and says, I don't know. Leave me alone. What's your problem anyway, man?" Doug doesn't respond as he continues to search all the places where he had been in the cave. He becomes hard-pressed as he even examines places where he had not been. He becomes embroiled and marches over to Cody's bag and begins to rifle through it. To a large extent, Cody is unconcerned and returns his attention to the contents of his book. Douglas yells out as he pulls his pistol out of Cody's bag and thrusts it in the air. "Aha! You had it all along. What are you doing with my gun? I told you never to touch her." Cody looks up at him and irritably and says, "What are you talking about? I didn't touch your gun." Douglas walks over to his face and inches away from his own face and spews out, "I told you never to touch my piece." He puts his finger between Cody's eyes as if preparing to strike or poke him with it. Cody becomes incensed and glares back at him again and says, "What's wrong with you, boy? You going crazy? I told you, I didn't touch your gun." Douglas explodes in rage as he slaps Cody with the back of his hand, bares his teeth like an animal, and says, "Don't you ever question my sanity." While the sting is still fresh on Cody's face, he assaults Doug with a headbutt, causing Doug to fall to the ground in agony as blood begins oozing out quickly from his both nostrils. Marie begins to untie Judge's hands, who immediately jumps to his feet and runs over to Cody and rams him from behind, knocking him to the ground. Marie sees Doug's weapon laying on the ground a few yards away from her. She moves quickly to retrieve it, becomes visible, and points the gun directly at him. While holding it securely with both hands, she reinforces the threat with a most menacing look and tells him to freeze. She hopes that will be enough. Marie remembered it was the same kind of look that her father, the cop, used when he was arresting a bad guy. Doug looks up in a bloody mess and says in revulsion and mystification, "Cripes, where did she come from?" "Don't move unless you want to be shot," warns Marie, with a voice slightly trembling along with the gun. Cody is still reeling with the impact of Judge's body tackle as he slowly staggers to his feet. Judge walks over to him and calmly thumps him in the forehead with the palm of his hand, sending him to the ground and reducing him to a state of unconsciousness. He smiles subtly after doing so and says to him sniggerly, "Where do you get my bill?" Judge steps over to Doug, buries him with an intense, cold stare coupled with an angry pressed lips. Doug, like a wrestler, heel of the old AWA Wrestling Association, looks at him for mercy to not hit him, and Judge is sickened with his ploy and says nothing. Doug continues to cowl with pain, holding his bloody face with both hands as Judge reaches into his canvas bag and tosses him a towel for his nose. Doug begins to tilt his head back to control the bleeding, and while Judge manages to find some restraining straps and cuffs, then ties him up. Judge looks at Doug as his nose continues to pump out gobs of blood and still in pain from Cody's headbutt, and says, "I shouldn't do this, but..." Judge, as painless, reaches for Doug's forehead and removes the pain and immediately stops the bleeding. The injured tissue steps back in time as his broken nose returns to the normal state and the blood-stained clothes disappears as well. A grateful Doug nods thank you and slowly settles himself to the ground as a beaten man. Doug begins to shake with fear as he looks at his pistol that Marie is still holding at him and slightly shaking. Doug looks over to Judge first and then submissively at Marie and says, "Please, if you don't mind, could you not point that at me?" Marie moves the gun, barrels away from him and to the ground as Judge walks over to Cody and ties him up as well. He takes the pistol away from Marie and takes the bullets out and the firing pin and places them inside a large lab coat pocket of his. He lays the gun down next to Doug and says, "I know how much you'd miss her if she wasn't nearby, so I'll put her here, and you both can be very happy together," he replies with sarcasm. Marie runs to her father's arms and begins to cry with happiness as she embraces him with relief, much the same way she did when she was a little girl growing up. Judge, too, succumbs to the emotional reunion as he returns the embrace. After a moment, Marie looks at her father and says with exhilaration and joy, "Dad, Mom's alive. You were right all along. She's not dead." Judge is speechless as he says nothing. He blinks twice as if saying, what did you say? Marie beams a smile back at him, saying it was true, and her smile burst into a chuckle as she chokes out the word to her father, "Yes, Dad, yes." And next week is the continuing, the reunion, you could say, as they become, he sees his wife and everything. So stay tuned for the next episode, and thank you for watching. Be sure you like it, click it, and share it, and I appreciate your efforts. Thank you.